Good morning, everyone. We are continuing here in Sefer CHOFETZ CHAIM, and today we will conclude the Klal Yud, the 10th chapter over here in this magnificent Sefer. And then he writes like this: V'kol zeh shekasavnu, everything we've written up until this point. And that is that Shimon could deny his personal involvement and he could shift the blame to others. Hu mitzad adin, that's all according to the strict halacha over here. Aval, however, roy lebal nefesh, a bal nefesh, which means someone that's very pious in the way that he deals with the mitzvahs, sheyaseh lifnim mishor zadin, that he himself will act beyond the letter of the law, v'lo yashmin es atzmai mizeh, he will not absolve himself from any culpability over here, even if in fact he's innocent, as we're going to see. If there's a possibility by absolving himself, so the one who's asking about this matter, let's call him Reuven, who's going to discover who the actual offender was, and that person who did the offense is going to be embarrassed. So if I have a way to save the embarrassment of somebody else, says the CHOFETZ CHAIM, I have an obligation to go lifnim mishor sadin. Or if that's the kind of person that I am, I act beyond the letter of the law, then you should over here as well. And we find in the Gemara in Sanhedrin many stories of Tanoim, the greatest of sages. They would accept upon themselves the blame for the ashma, for the wrongdoing that was done, in order that the real offender would not be discovered. The Sefer Chasidim, famous, magnificent work that speaks about the high levels of Chasidus, of piety that a person can reach. And he says the following: if you are amongst a group of people, and somebody did something wrong, and the person who did the offense, his identity is not known, you should say to yourself the following: Ani hu shechatasi. Should say, no, say out loud, I'm the one who sinned, af al pi shelo, even though you didn't. Ayin Sham, take a look over there in the words of the Sefer Chasidim. You're saving another person's embarrassment, even though that you are not the one who did it. Says the CHOFETZ CHAIM, when it comes to the laws of Lashon Hara, and even when there's to'elas, and you could say, but if you're going to cause embarrassment to somebody else, and you could save their face by just taking the blame for yourself, if you're a real pious individual, and you're looking for tzidkus and chasidus and the like, then you can be like the Sefer Chasidim, says the CHOFETZ CHAIM, take the blame, take the fall, let the other person walk away without having any embarrassment. There's a beautiful Maisa, I believe that the Maisa is of Asher Zelig Rubinstein, who was one of the Chashav Rosh Yeshivas who passed away from a sickness, must be maybe almost 10 years ago. At the Shiva house, somebody came to the Shiva house and said, I want to tell you the following story. He said, many, many years ago, he said, I wanted to go to a certain yeshiva. And I came to that yeshiva, it was an Erev Shabbos, and the Rosh Yeshiva, or whatever, I think, and the Rosh Yeshiva was going to give a shir, and he didn't let any outsiders into that shir. He said, and I begged, please let me, I want to come, I want to see if the shir is the right thing for me. And it's in the main base midrash, and there's a lot of people that are there. And he said, no, people that don't belong to this yeshiva, they don't, if you join the yeshiva one day, you'll come. And I begged him, please. The yeshiva said, in the end, fine, you can come, but don't say a word, just sit there and listen. Don't hack me up, don't start asking questions, you can just sit there and listen. I'm going to give the shir, fine. In the middle of the shir, a cell phone started ringing. And the Rosh Yeshiva stopped in the middle of his dissertation, and he looked around, and everyone's looking around. But everyone's too nervous. How they're going to pull out their phone to turn it off. The Rosh Yeshiva's going to get upset. Everyone's looking around, and the phone stops ringing. He goes back to his shir. About 2 minutes later, the phone starts ringing again. Obviously, somebody's phone was on, and somebody was calling them, but they didn't turn it off. And the Rosh Yeshiva stops in the middle of his shir, and he's looking around, he's getting upset. Somebody has the chutzpah to have a phone on in the base mission. They didn't turn it off. It stops ringing. About 5 minutes later, the phone rings again. And at this point, the yeshiva gets very upset. And he says, somebody has their phone and they're not turning it off and they're ruining the shir. And at this point, Rav Asher Zelig Rubinstein, who was already known to be a chashuva person, he pulled his phone out of his pocket and he said, I'm so sorry, I forgot to turn off my phone. The Rosh Yeshiva said, too late. I'm not giving shir in such a place where people don't turn off their phones. And he stormed out. And then this man who's at the Shiva house begins crying and he says, Rabbi Sai, children of the nifta of the departed Rav Rubinstein, he said, it wasn't his phone that was ringing. It was my phone that was ringing. And I was too nervous to reach into my pocket and to turn it off. And when it rang the third time, I was horrified. But your father didn't want to make me embarrassed. And he took the embarrassment on himself. And he said it was his phone that was ringing, but it wasn't, it was mine. I'll never forget how your father saved my shame and my embarrassment on that day, taking the blame all to himself. Says the CHOFETZ CHAIM, even when you know that someone's in the wrong, and even when you can prove them wrong, and even when you can expose them and everything, if there's a way for you to save their dignity and their honor and not embarrass them publicly, take the hit yourself. Take the blame yourself and save them. Person never knows the impression that it's going to make on others. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos.